listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the 15-minute show. I'm Adam Keys and today we're going to be talking about Nwaneri. He lit up the arena the other night against Manchester United, and we're going to be talking about whether he's ready or not, what he will bring to the Arsenal team, what he's done for the 21s, what he's done for the 18s, England under 17s, how he can fit in with Arsenal this season, and where new signings will impact the potential role he can have in the Arsenal team. So first up, we're going to have a look at what Mikel Arteta said. So Mikel has been very much out there saying there's an opportunity there. It's always in the hands of the players. Show what you can do, show what you can accomplish, and things will happen naturally. I love this quote. This is something that shows that the opportunity is there. Players can go out and earn their opportunity. They can grab their chance. At the level Arsenal are playing at now, no one is going to be handed minutes. No one is just going to be picked because they've got potential. People are only going to get game time for Arsenal because they've earned it. And that's exactly how it should be. That's how it's always been in elite level sport. And Nwaneri has elite level potential, and it's now on him to grab it with both hands. He has now got the perfect platform over the next couple of weeks before the Premier League season kicks off to showcase his talent. He's done it against Bornemouth. He's done it against United. He did it against Boreham in pre-season, and then he did it again against Leyton Orient. Now is the time for him to really showcase what he can do before Bukayo Saka comes back, before Declan Rice comes back, when Kai Havertz is still getting up to speed. Now is the time for Nwaneri to really grab this opportunity with both hands and show that he is ready to play. I've said before this season, I don't want to see youthful promise from Nwaneri. I want to see him show his level, show his personality, go out and grab the game and show what he can do. I'm not expecting him to control and dictate. What I'm asking for is for him to go out and show what he can do, show what he's done for the 21s. Youthful promise to me is overplaying, really showing off a bit. Those glimpses of promise, we've seen that from him. We've seen it whenever he came on against Bournemouth 2 years ago, or Brentford, sorry. We saw it against West Ham. We've seen the glimmers of hope from Nwaneri. Now it's time to show he is mature enough. He's physically ready. He plays with a level of composure that first team players do. And that's exactly what he's been doing so far. And that's only going to improve. And this is something I talked about. One of the things that I've really seen is he's thrived in small spaces for Arsenal. He's made assured decisions and physicality beyond his years. That's something that shows to me this guy's ready to play. Because the big thing for youth players coming through is, can they handle the physical side of the game? Can they compete in duels? Are they going to be bounced off the ball? With Nwaneri, he's technically extremely gifted. So in those small spaces, he's got David Silva type prowess, Martin Odegaard-isms that exist within his game, that he can really move his feet quickly. He can drop the shoulder. He can play his way out. But what's really fascinating about this kid is that it's not just those areas of his game. Physically, when he's in a small space and someone comes in hard on him, he can handle it. He loves that side of the game. I watched him play for the under-21s last year against Sunderland. He was up against Bradley Dack, an extremely experienced championship player with over 400 games for Blackburn. And he was playing on his return from injury. Nwaneri was 16 years old, playing against a 29-year-old, extremely physical midfielder. He made him look silly. He competed physically in every duel with Bradley Dack, and he came out 9 times out of 10 on top. And that's what we want to see. It's not just, can you play with the ball at your feet? It's, can you play with your head up? How do you operate in small spaces? And the other thing that we've seen from Nwaneri is his bigger range. He's been able to carry very well in pre-season. He's been able to shrug players off when he's running with the ball. Tight control, carry the ball down the right. And that, to me, shows this is a guy that's capable of playing on the right-hand side because he's got the physical strength. He's quick enough to be able to play as a winger. He can cut inside. He can go on the outside. Yes, his right foot isn't as strong as his left, but these things open up potentials, because whenever you're a young player, if you're very, very specific in what you do, you have to be elite at that level to get first team minutes. What Nwaneri's showing is he could play on the right if needed. He is an 8. He could be Odegaard's backup this season. He can play as a left 8, but also he can play on the left-hand side, as we saw from his assist against Man United. And the Man United game, what stood out was just how composed he looked. One of the things I'm a real sucker for is a player that plays with their head up. I love it. A player that plays with their head up sees the picture in front of them. And Ethan Nwaneri gets the ball, and it's very similar to how Bukayo Saka plays, how Jack Wilshere played the game. They play with their head up. They see the picture. They're not scared to run at players. They release the ball very well. Wilshere and Saka both have a similar trait, despite being completely different players, in that they can run at players and release the ball at a very, very efficient point and get it back. And that's something that we're seeing from Ethan Nwaneri. His small space, tight control is exceptional. But as I said, his ability to operate in those bigger spaces is something that I'm seeing in this preseason that I maybe hadn't seen as much of coming into this preseason run. Interestingly, one of the things that we're seeing as well is his long-range passing. He isn't scared to get his head up and ping the ball across the park. He's not just looking at those small-sided games that he's probably most comfortable in. He's showing that there's other areas of his game that he's maybe not as known for. And with Mikel Arteta behind him, he's going to be pushed to try those things. What he can do now isn't going to be enough. People will say, don't put pressure on young players. Look, the academy structure is one of the most grueling, ruthless things that any player can go through. Every time you step on the pitch, there is pressure on your shoulders. And stepping onto the first team, stepping into this environment, yes, it's a pre-season friendly, but you're playing in a packed stadium. This isn't like 20 years ago when Arsenal went away to play in the Austrian Alps. We're talking about the SoFi Stadium with about 80,000 people watching you. The pressure is on. There's TV cameras there. People are viewing it all over the world. It's not about putting pressure on these players. These players believe they're good enough. They know they're good enough and they want to play. So I wanted to go back to a quote about Ethan Nwaneri on the point of knowing he's good enough. It was the West Ham game last year where he came on and the players were saying to Mikel Arteta, bring Ethan on, give him some game time. And what I loved about this quote was what Arteta said afterwards. He said, if they do that, it's because they really trust you and I've seen many times that you're good enough to be involved. It was a great sign. This was experienced players like Jorginho saying to Arteta, get him on the field. That shows that they've seen him do it in training. They believe he's comfortable enough. And most importantly, that he can handle it. And this comes back to the whole don't put pressure on young players. If they believe they're good enough and their teammates believe they're good enough, it's not about us putting pressure on them. As fans, what we say, it doesn't really matter that much as long as we're not being abusive towards players. If we're placing expectation on them, that's what they live by. These guys are elite athletes that place unbelievably high standards on themselves. And to get to the level he's got to at 17 years old, it's because he places those standards on himself. But just looking at his performances in the last two games, if you look at where he's played, so against Bornemouth, the one on the left-hand side here, he played 84 minutes, completed 32 of 37 passes and had 48 touches of the ball, which I really liked because it showed he wanted to get on the ball. He was showing himself and he had two key passes in that game as well. But when you look at the heat map, he's all over the pitch. So people would normally consider Ethan Nwaneri as a right 8 and someone for the youth team. Lewis Skelly takes up more of the left side. Ethan takes up more of the right, cuts inside, shoots a lot, has those clip passes into the box. But Arteta's used him more on the left, with Martin Odegaard occupying the position he's going to occupy. The left 8 is the position with the most room in the Arsenal team and where he can probably get the most minutes. Against Man United, he only played 45 minutes. But again, 29 touches of the ball. So if you break that out by minutes, that's more touches than he had against Bournemouth in that period of time. He got an assist, a great cross into the box for Gabriel Jesus. And it's one of those crosses that it looks easy when the ball goes into the back of the net. Underhit that, Onana gathers it. Overhits it, it flies past, and we say Gabriel Jesus was an inch away. But he's hit that ball absolutely perfectly. He's found the space. He's just ghosted in, and he's shown exactly how good he is on a technical level and his awareness of where his teammates are. And that's something that, again, it's that execution, that decision making in the final third, that shows how good you are as a young player, that you're able to do that and stand up against a Man United team who at that point of the game were very strong and had a lot of good players on the pitch. And again, you look at it, he came away with that game, won 100% of his tackles, 100% successful dribbles, and 100% of his aerial duels. We know how much Mikel Arteta values duel winning. It's something, I'm guilty of it now. I would never have looked at a player's stats after a game and looked to see how many duels they won, because I was brought up under Arsene Wenger, free-flowing football for a long part of my life. Although Arsene Wenger's early teams were duel winners, they were big physical players. Vieira, Gilberto, Petit before that. These players crunching tackles, played beautiful football, but also embraced the physical side of the game. And that's something that Arteta's doing. He's bringing back that physicality to Arsenal while similarly marrying it with a technical, fluid style of football that cuts teams open. And when you see a young player like Nwaneri having these kind of numbers in pre-season, that's what he needs to do. I've talked about Smith Rowe before, and people have accused me of being harsh. Smith Rowe has all the ability in the world going forward, but Mikel Arteta values duels more than any other manager I've ever come across. And we're seeing Nwaneri going in for these duels, winning it, being committed, tracking back, going forward, playing the game right across the pitch as Mikel wants him to. And that's the key. You have to play as the manager wants you to. And we talk about earning your right to play. And that's the thing. Arteta said the opportunity's there. He's very clear on what he wants from his players. And if his players go out and do those things, if they go out and grab the opportunity, follow the instructions, then they will have the opportunity and platform to showcase their technical qualities after that. Because you do the basics well, you will be able to do the fancy stuff on top of that. And doing the basics at an elite level is one of the hardest things in football. And it's why players like Sergi Busquets, for example, makes the game look so easy, because he does the basics so well to a point that it's almost unimaginable for most. But interestingly, Arsenal have been heavily linked to Mikel Merino. It looks like a signing that could very well happen, but people will ask, why are Arsenal going for another midfielder whenever Ethan's coming through? Well, interestingly, Mikel Merino's 28 years old. He's someone that Arsenal will probably be looking to get his best years for another 2 to 3 seasons. You're talking about a 4-year deal. He just turned 28 about a month ago. So if you sign Mikel Merino, you get probably four years out of him. He turns 32 when his contract would end, and you'd maybe give an option for a 5th year. That gives Nwaneri a perfect pathway. This season, it would give him the option of playing around 20 games. He would have someone like Merino to learn from. This is a specialist left 8. This is someone who has really learned that position, can play in a double pivot, can play further forward. And interestingly, if you look at some of Merino's biggest strengths, it's clip balls into the box. He gets it in that right half space, looks up and dinks it in. Jorginho does these very well as well. So if you've got someone like Nwaneri who really, really thrives in this area of the pitch, get an experienced player in. I said it before, but if Arsenal go out and spend 100 million on someone like Bruno Guimaraes, who will instantly raise the level of the team, there's no doubt about that. If we want short-term success, Bruno would give us that for the next 4 years. I have no doubt about that. I think he's probably the safest option we could go for. But it does say to Nwaneri, there's a clear blocker in your way. This guy is going to be taking your minutes. He's not going to be coming out of the team anytime soon. Whereas with someone like Merino, it gives Nwaneri probably 2 to 3 years to really build up his minutes in the team and then be a regular starter. And if you think 3 years' time, that leaves Ethan 20 years old. He's still extremely young. He wouldn't be a 19-year-old still building up, or he wouldn't be a player in his mid-20s that demands the minutes. He'd be someone that's 20 years old that is then ready to play, to hold down his spot. And this is something we need to put pressure on them, because that's how you create diamonds. It's created through pressure. These environments, the minutes, that is how they will really refine their game. But at the same time, we have to be careful of overload. So the way I see it this season is Nwaneri probably playing 20 games in all competition, few starts in each of the cups, maybe some Champions League minutes, and then coming off the bench, and maybe some Premier League starts in games like Ipswich and teams down near the bottom of the table. If that happens, you can very quickly build up your minutes, and 20 games doesn't be long coming in. Interestingly, when you look at Arsenal's most used players last season, so these are the most used, you can see there's quite a few players playing a lot of minutes here. So with this, Martin Odegaard played over 3,000 minutes last year. There were a number of 90s he didn't need to compete. But Fabio Vieira was injured and we didn't have a player that we could really hook Odegaard for. This is where I see Ethan Nwaneri grabbing minutes. If Arsenal are 3-0 up in games, get Odegaard off with 20 minutes to go. Get Ethan Nwaneri on the pitch. He'll be hungry. He'll want to go out and showcase what he can do. He'll want to prove he's ready to play at this level. That's how you get an extra couple of goals in games, because these players want to do something. It's not a first teamer coming on that's just happy seeing the game out. The young players come on with even more hunger and they're ready to go. So get those minutes. This is where there's minutes to be spread. Bear in mind there's an extra 2 games minimum this season, and Arsenal went out after just 2 League Cup games and in the third round of the FA Cup last year. So you would like to think we'll be playing a minimum of probably 6 or 7 games more this season. Those minutes are there to be taken. And this is where someone like Ethan Nwaneri can really thrive and grab those minutes. Same with Bukayo Saka. As I mentioned, he can play on the right-hand side of midfield. That's where minutes can be gained. And I've already mentioned the left side. But when you compare it to the players down the bottom, Smith Rowe will be leaving. It looks like that deal to Fulham's more or less done. There's 353 minutes that can be taken straight away. There's other minutes in there. Reece Nelson's minutes. These are minutes that are up for grabs. These players probably won't be replaced. There will be players that are going to be upgraded upon, but there's also players who have taken minutes that won't be replaced. And this is where Ethan Nwaneri can take those minutes, grab them, and really show his capabilities on the pitch. And finally, the hope is that this season we'll see less of this and more of this from Ethan Nwaneri, because what we know is this is a player who thrives in physical contact games. For the 21s, one of his key assets is coming into that right half space, getting the ball, getting his head up, shooting from distance, clipping the ball into the box from distance, carrying into the final third. One of the weaknesses that Ethan has is the want to overplay. This is something that happens a lot with very technically gifted young players, players that are beyond their years, and players who are playing at a level too good for them or too low for them. Whenever they're a really big fish in a small pond, they have got the tendency to maybe hold on to the ball a bit longer than they need to really do things that they don't need to. And part of that maybe is a lack of trust for their teammates, or just that they hold themselves in such high regard and they know how much ability that they have, that they do just overplay a bit. These are things that you iron out in your game whenever you play first team football. And with Mikel Arteta at the helm, I have 100% faith that this will be something that will be coached out of Nwaneri. His decision making will become sharper. He will become more astute in everything that he does. And what we've seen with Martin Odegaard over the last few years is that Arteta can absolutely coach a player in this position. We saw Granit Xhaka play some of his best football of his career playing in the left 8 at Arsenal, a position that Mikel Arteta coached him to play. Just imagine what Arteta can do with a player like Nwaneri, who's coming through, having been brought up playing in that position, and is now being developed into a specialist 8. So look, drop us a comment. Tell us what you think. How many minutes should Ethan Nwaneri get this season? How many games should he be playing in total? Do you think Mikel Merino is the right signing when you've got a player like Ethan Nwaneri coming through? This is a player that should create a pathway for him, should keep him sharp, give him someone to learn from, and ultimately help raise the floor at Arsenal and thus raise the ceiling. So this is a player that we can't write off this season. He should be playing a lot of minutes. He will play a lot of minutes, and he will make an impact on Arsenal. If it comes to the end of the season and we're saying anything else, we do have to review how Arteta manages Hale End players, because this guy is special. He is ready to play. He's not ready to be a week in, week out starter, but he is ready to contribute to the first team at Arsenal in a title competing season. Look, thank you to everyone that's joined. If you're watching, please hit the like button. Please drop us a comment and please hit subscribe on the channel. And join us again during the week for another show. Thank you for joining.